Today I am going to read you a story from my book, Merry as a Cricket, published by WhipperSnapper Books. I'm going to read you the second story in the book, titled Pocketful of Chocolate. This story is about a little boy named Stephen who is the new kid on the block. He had to move away from his old home, and he's having a hard time. Okay, let's begin. Outside Stephen's new home, the morning sun polished the neighborhood with its glow. 2 squirrels scampered up and down the large maple tree in Stephen's yard. A flock of hungry birds, up early like Stephen and his mom, settled in Stephen's front yard to forage for bugs. Leaves in all of fall's colors, russets, yellows, and oranges, drifted to the ground around them. None of this mattered to Stephen, who just stared at the table. "Stephen, honey, stop brooding and eat your toast," his mom said. "I'm not hungry," Stephen said as he pushed his plate away and folded his arms. "I want to go home." "This is our home now," Stephen's mom sighed and continued to unpack a box of dishes. Stephen looked around at the bare walls and the boxes scattered here and there. "I want my old home," Stephen said as his eyes filled with tears. "I want my old friends." "Dad couldn't help it that his boss gave him a transfer," his mom said, putting her arm around Stephen. "Why don't you give our new home a chance?" "I don't want to. I'll never like it here," Stephen wailed as he ran to his room. He decided to stay there and stare out his window. Stephen tried not to, but he started to notice things in his yard. There was a cool tree stump near the side fence, a pile of old bricks, and a gigantic oak that just might make a good fort. Stephen's mind drifted a little as he watched birds hunting for bugs, when suddenly all the birds scattered. Stephen spied an orange marmalade-colored cat entering his yard under the fence, and he watched it as it padded along the grass and hopped up onto his front porch. The cat meowed until Stephen came downstairs and went outside. Then it rubbed back and forth against Stephen's leg. He stooped down to pet it. A little girl ran up to the porch steps. "There you are, Mickey! I've been looking all over for you. It's time to get you cleaned up." "Is he your cat?" Stephen asked. "Yes, I'm Liddy, and I live right down the street." Mickey purred and purred as Stephen petted his soft fur. "He seems to like you," Liddy said. "What's your name?" "Stephen. We just moved in, unfortunately." Stephen told Liddy that he wanted to move back to his old neighborhood. "I bet you miss your old neighborhood friends," Liddy said. "My friend Nora moved away last year. She used to live in your house. She lives in Cleveland now." "Mickey misses her," Liddy said, as Mickey tried to climb up the leg of Stephen's overalls. "But you know, it's fun here too," Liddy added. "Maybe you'll get to like it. What are you doing this afternoon?" Stephen shrugged. "We're Catholic," said Liddy, "and we're taking our pets to the church for the blessing of the animals." "What's that?" Stephen asked. "October 4th is the feast of St. Francis," Liddy explained. "Father Casey told me that St. Francis loved animals so much that we celebrate his feast day by having our pets blessed." "I've never heard of that before," Stephen said. "Well, not all Catholic churches celebrate by having their pets come to church," Liddy said, "but we do at St. Anne's. Plus, every year the 6th graders in faith formation do an animal rescue project while they are learning about St. Francis. Sister Carolita is in charge of it. This year, my big sister Julia is in her class, and they have been taking turns nursing orphaned puppies from the animal shelter. Julia got up at 6 o'clock every Saturday morning to feed them. Now the puppies are ready to find new homes. Julia told me they'll be at the blessing." "Do you have a pet to bring?" Liddy asked. "Just an ant farm," Stephen said, frowning. "We lived in an apartment that didn't allow animals." Liddy invited Stephen to bring his ant farm to the blessing of the animals. "I'm not Catholic," Stephen said. "You don't have to be Catholic to visit our church." "Well, okay," Stephen agreed. "I've just got to check with my mom." 2 hours later, small groups of people and animals were heading for St. Anne's from all over town. Liddy pushed Mickey in her toy baby buggy. She had tied a big blue bow around the cat's collar. Stephen carried his ant farm, and Liddy's brother Mark carried his gecko in a cage. Liddy's sister Julia walked behind them with their mom, dad, and grandmother Bennett. Julia's 7 goldfish were making the trip in a Ziploc bag. Grandma Bennett's 2 beloved dogs, Bing and Ingrid, trotted beside her. The sidewalks near the church were filled with people and their pets. There were all kinds of cats and dogs, and kids brought cages with snakes, lizards, mice, and hamsters. Water sloshed back and forth in the fish bowls that some people carried. Mrs. Warner held her beautiful gray chinchilla rabbit, Foo-Foo. Foo-Foo twitched her pink nose in the air. Oscar Zanotto walked up with his parrot, Zinger, on his shoulder. "Good afternoon, Father," he called to Father Casey. "Awk! Papa wants a blessing!" Zinger squeaked. Liddy, Stephen, and Mark laughed. "Oink, oink!" snorted a pot-bellied pig on a leash. Its bristly hair stuck up on its back, and it wagged its tail, which was adorned with a stream of pink and white ribbons. Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez rode their horses over to the church garden. Both horses had strings of daisies clipped to their manes. Father Casey and Father Leong stood in the garden. "Let's form a circle," Father Casey said, "with cats on one side, dogs on the other, and everything else in between." A Franciscan brother from St. Anthony's Dairy Farm led a Holstein cow towards the circle. She wore a wreath of gardenia flowers around her neck, along with a large bell that went clang, clang as she walked. "Look, Stephen," said Liddy, "our milk comes from that farm." Stephen looked around at all the different animals. The pigs snorted, the dogs barked and whimpered, the cats meowed, the horses whinnied, the cow mooed, and the fish swam around in their bowls. Liddy nudged Stephen and pointed to a girl holding a small aquarium in her hands. "That's Sonia. She's new in town too," said Liddy as she pulled him over to Sonia. "What's in there?" Stephen asked. "Sea monkeys," she said as she looked at Stephen's ant farm. "Who are you?" Libby said, "This is my new friend Stephen." A small boy held a Siamese kitten. One little girl cuddled a stuffed white cat. "Father Casey said if we don't have a pet, we could bring a stuffed animal," Liddy whispered to Stephen. "Let's begin," Father Casey said, "in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit." Everyone made the sign of the cross to bless themselves. Liddy did it slowly so Stephen could copy her. "What a lovely day to gather in honor of St. Francis," Father Casey said. "Just listen to the animals. It's a wonderful chorus sending joyful sounds up to heaven." Everyone smiled as they listened to the noises. One of the horses whinnied loudly and then bent her head down to chomp on a daffodil. Father Casey continued with an old poem. "All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all." By Cecil Francis Alexander. Then he talked about how St. Francis loved all of God's creatures because God created them. St. Francis called them his brothers and sisters, the priest said. Father Leon read from the book of Genesis in the Bible. "The man gave names to all the cattle, all the birds of the air, and all the wild animals." 2 Genesis 20. Next, Father Leon read from Psalm 8. "You have given him rule over the works of your hands, putting all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, yes, and the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, the fishes of the sea." 8 Psalm 6 through 8. Then both priests sprinkled holy water over the people and their pets. Father Casey prayed, "O God, we thank you for these animals, our fellow creatures. Keep them safe and help us to treat them with kindness as St. Francis would. Bless these pets, our faithful companions, Lord, and guide all of us as we continue in our faith journey." Father Casey and Father Leon prayed a special blessing over the animals that were sick. When the ceremony ended, Mark, Liddy, and Stephen rushed over to the 6th graders and their puppies. Sister Carolita was showing one to Mr. Dembski. "We think that they're part Labrador," she told him. Stephen's eyes grew wide when he saw 7 brown puppies nipping playfully at each other. "They're so cute," Liddy said. "Hi, Julia, this is my new friend Stephen. He lives in Nora's old house." Julia picked up one of the puppies. "Would you like to hold him?" she asked Stephen. The puppy squirmed in Stephen's hands and licked his face. "He sure does like you. We're looking for good homes for these puppies. Would you like to adopt one?" Julia asked. Stephen's face brightened. "I have to ask my mom," he said as he nuzzled the puppy. "That sounds good," said Julia. "Come over after you talk to your mom. The puppies are staying at our house tonight." "Yippee!" cried Liddy. Stephen rushed home as fast as he could without disturbing his ant farm. At first, Stephen's mother hesitated. "I don't have time to care for a puppy," she said. Stephen promised to feed it, train it, and clean up after it. Stephen's mom looked at him a moment and then nodded. "I know that you'll follow through on that promise," she said. "I think a puppy is a good idea. Let's just check with your father." Stephen held his breath until his mom hung up the phone and smiled. Dad says it's okay with him, too. Stephen grinned and shouted, "Yes! Yes! Yes!" Then he danced through the house as if he had ants in his pants. Later that day, as Stephen's parents watched from the window, Stephen, Liddy, and Mark wrestled with Stephen's new puppy. Mickey watched suspiciously from the tree. "Do you like your new neighborhood any better now?" Liddy asked. Stephen smiled. "I think I'm going to like it here after all." "What are you going to name him?" Mark asked. "I'm going to call him Chocolate," answered Stephen, as he got up to chase his new dog. "Good thing that he's already been blessed. That will help him feel better about his new home." "Don't forget to take him to the vet, too," Liddy said seriously. "He still needs his puppy shots." Stephen stopped in his tracks. "Shots?" he whispered. "Don't worry," said Mark. "Puppies are very brave." The end. That's the end of Pocketful of Chocolate, the second story in Merry as a Cricket. The first story is about the church carnival. And at the end of the second story, at the end of Pocketful of Chocolate, is a picture dictionary for kids to learn about the meanings of new words that they might not be familiar with. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I hope you will come back for more.